Hello everyone, I noticed that you liked the Pirates of the Caribbean video, so I decided to launch a series of videos about little-known facts from films, because this is actually an interesting topic. And in this video, as you might have guessed from the title of the video, I will tell you little-known facts from the trilogy of the Hobbit films. As before, if you learn something new from the video, do not be lazy and put a like, if not, then put a dislike or just turn off the video. Let's get started. Let's start perhaps with the very idea of writing a book about the Hobbit. Since John Tolkien came up with the idea of writing a book after the phrase, "There was a hole in the ground, and a hobbit lived in a hole," crashed into his head. You know, after such a phrase, even I wanted to sit down and continue writing the story of the Hobbit. No, seriously, the phrase is pretty catchy. Well, this very phrase stuck in John's head. After a while, he finally started writing a book, which became his literary debut. Interestingly, the author did not intend to publish this fairy tale, he initially wanted to leave it for home use. But the story of Bilbo Baggins got into the hands of the publisher, and he even paid his 10-year-old son to read the tale and make his verdict. The boy was simply fascinated by the story, and from that moment the fate of the Hobbit was sealed. The movie, The Hobbit, has long taken its place in the history of cinema, but there is one very interesting fact. The thing is that this picture was the first full-length feature film that was shot and shown at a speed of 48 frames per second. The shooting equipment that exists at the moment, in general, is designed for a standard frequency of 24 frames. But the equipment in cinemas allows you to play movies with a frequency of up to 60 frames per second. I will not go through the films that came out after The Hobbit and with what frame rate they were, but The Hobbit was the first film with a frequency of 48 frames. According to the director of the trilogy, these 48 frames made the picture smoother, deeper and more realistic, which, combined with 3D technology, gave the viewer a sense of presence in the film that the viewer had not experienced before. But as it usually happens, you will not please everyone, so the audience was divided into two camps with the same zeal praising or condemning such a decision. But whatever it was, the film doesn't look any worse from this. But, do you know that this was not the first or even the second film adaptation of The Hobbit? Yes, Peter Jackson is not the first who filmed the story about the brave Bilbo Baggins. Because, for the first time, the story of The Hobbit appeared on the screens in 1977, and the Warner Brothers company had a hand in it, which filmed an animated musical based on Tolkien's work. Tolkien himself categorically refused to deal with the Disney studio, because he did not want his story to be turned into something too optimistic and frivolous. Well, the second time Bilbo ran back and forth in 1985, then in the Soviet Union, an hour-long TV show about The Hobbit was filmed at the Lentelefilm studio. Well, as you already understood, the film was filmed. For this reason, I think it's worth mentioning that in the role of Bilbo Baggins, we could not see Martin Freeman, but, for example, Daniel Radcliffe, James McAvoy or even Tobey Maguire. However, the director himself said that Martin was always his first choice, and despite the conflict with the filming of Sherlock, Freeman starred in his legendary role of the Hobbit. However, Jackson had to redo the entire filming schedule so that the trilogy could adapt to Martin Freeman. By the way, the plot between Bilbo and Gollum was filmed in full, because the actors performed the entire scene, from beginning to end, as if they were playing in a play, and so it was for 2 weeks. It was at the very beginning of the production of the picture, and in this way Peter Jackson wanted to help Freeman get used to the role of Bilbo. By the way, do you remember the riddle contest between Bilbo and Gollum? The end of these competitions is inspired by a Scandinavian legend where the giant Vafthrudner and god Odin also competed. Bilbo won the contest by asking Gollum the question, "What is in his pocket?" to which only Baggins knew the answer. And in the same way, Odin defeated Vafthrudner. He asked him, "What did I whisper in the ear of my dying son Boldr?" a question to which only one will know the answer. Such is an interesting parallel. Interesting fact about Gandalf. You all know this wise wizard who wanders the world, but he did not have such a name right away, because Tolkien initially assigned this name not to the elder with the staff, but to the leader of the dwarves, Thorin Oakenshield. Gandalf himself could have received the name Bloodorton, which the author still refused, since this name seemed very frivolous to him. Although I think that the root, blood, still adds its sharpness to the name. Meanwhile, Gandalf's real name is Olorin, and he was called Gandalf by the inhabitants of Middle-earth, which means, elf of the wand, which indicates the staff with which he always walked. We all know Gollum, who was obsessed with the ring in all 3 parts of The Lord of the Rings. But in The Hobbit, his participation was limited to an extensive scene only in the first chapter of Bilbo's journey. Since the scene was shot very quickly, actor Andy Serkis, who played Gollum, had a lot of free time and decided to use it to the maximum advantage. Therefore, Serkis sat in the chair of the second director and actively participated in the filming. He was independently engaged in the production of second unit scenes. Have you ever wondered how Tolkien invented all these names for dwarves, Bifur, Bofur, Fili, Kili? He must have a very good imagination, you say. But no, the fact is that the author was fascinated by the Anglo-Saxon written culture, and she introduced him to a collection of Old Norse songs about gods and heroes. That's right there, he found all 11 names for dwarves, as well as the name Gandalf. I think there is nothing surprising in the fact that both the trilogies of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are connected. For example, the dwarf Gloin accompanying Bilbo is the father of the dwarf Gimli, who accompanied Frodo himself on the campaign, and the archer Legolas from The Lord of the Rings is the son of the king of the forest elves Thranduil. Well, I think there is nothing surprising here, you already knew all this yourself. Interestingly, in order to play the role of the dragon Smaug for a solid 5, Benedict Cumberbatch trained his body for 6 months so that he could achieve the necessary flexibility for filming. The movements of his face, hands, and body were read using motion capture technology. By the way, it was on the basis of the game of his body that the dragon Smaug was created, and it took the artists a whole week to draw the dragon's skin and apply it to the movements of Benedict, who also voiced the dragon. Benedict also voiced the necromancer. To make the sound of the spell texts even darker, he suggested reading them backwards, which was approved and done. But in turn, for the orcs, silicone pads and plates were created, which, to me, is much better than computer graphics. Take a look at old horror films where makeup was used and current ones, where graphics are almost everywhere, and conclude that it looks scarier. Here the opinion is subjective. By the way, the dwarves, along with the orcs, also became heroes, who were made with the help of plastic makeup, and not computer graphics. 5 sets of wigs, as well as facial and body linings were created for them. An interesting fact is that in total, it took 4 tons of silicone to make up all the characters in the picture. And trolls, in turn, were created using computer graphics. For example, a scene with trolls where the main characters had a battle with them began with the creation of a 3-dimensional animatic, which helped the director determine the shooting angle, camera movement, timings, etc. Next, the actors who played the trolls gave their emotions and movement during the game capture session. After that, the dwarves and the hobbit performed their roles, and so that they would look in the right direction and at the right height. Because the trolls were added to the frame much later, the actors were forced to look at the fishing rod with a ball. And after that, the development of computer models of trolls was carried out, which was tuned, animated, and all the other delights of animation. Well, in the end, all the ingredients were placed on one composition and we saw an exciting battle scene with you. By the way, since the film was shot with a frequency of 48 frames, the animators paid special attention to the most time-consuming areas of the face for animation, articulation, blinking of the eyes, and the like. In addition, the updated Gollum was also created using motion capture technology, and since in The Lord of the Rings the shooting was conducted in 24 frames, here 48 frames per second, gave Gollum 10 times more polygons and 3 times more expressions. From this we see that the character has become more mobile and thus he has revealed himself better through the transmission of the nuances of acting. For example, in The Lord of the Rings, the transition from Gollum to Smeagol took place through the contraction of the pupil, and in The Hobbit, the animators forced the creature to experience a physical spasm when changing characters. For this reason, in these films, the animators have worked hard. Well, let's move on to the numbers. Responsible for a bunch of rubber hands on the site was one person. During the entire filming, actor John Bell, who played the son of Bart, added 10 centimeters to his height. As I have already said, the weight of the silicone used to create the pads was 4 tons. The weight of real human hair that was purchased to create wigs was equal to 10 kilograms, and all these wigs came out 91 pieces. The number of people who portrayed gnomes, including the actors themselves, understudies and stuntmen, is 65. The number of silicone feet made for Bilbo was 100 pieces. There were more than 260 beards made for dwarves. The crowd was 1,200 people. And the coins and cups for the cave where the dragon lived were made in the amount of 170,000 units. It's a little sad, but the second trilogy passed as quickly as 19 years have passed since the release of the first part of The Lord of the Rings. At this moment, we all felt old. Will Peter Jackson give us another opportunity to return to Middle-earth? This is known only to the producers, but if you really want to go there, then in 2009, Tolkien fans made two films, The Birth of Hope and The Hunt for Gollum. These two films describe events that took place before The Hobbit and between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Both of these films are freely available even on YouTube, so it won't be difficult for you to find them. And with that, our journey through the fabulous world of The Hobbit is coming to an end. I hope you were interested and learned something new from my video. If so, don't forget about the likes. You can also subscribe to the channel, click the bell, because I plan to release some more videos on this topic, so it will be interesting. And with that, I'm saying goodbye to you, see you soon.